Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today I'm going to introduce you to Ryan Vong. He was the founder and CEO of DigitalPi, a global marketing automation agency in the B2B space. He was on the Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies 2 years in a row, and ultimately acquired by Merkle, part of the Dentsu Network, one of the world's largest holding companies, in January 2020. Yep, right before COVID hit. He shares the journey from starting as a single consultant, going through the various stages of growth and expansion of his team, and walks us through step by step in doing the deal. So let's dive in. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Help the listener and the watcher understand your journey and relate to you a little bit, because you got a good one, and you've accomplished what many seek in starting agencies, or maybe at a point of the agency, which is your exit. So help us relate to you before you start talking about your exit.
Sounds good. When I first started the agency, it was actually out of just a frustration in the corporate world, I would say, and thought of a world in which, where I would want to work. I spoke to my wife about it, and we sort of decided all these factors really didn't exist in a company, unless I started one and made it exactly the way I wanted. So that's sort of how we started the company about 10 years ago. And I started off as a single consultant, started to really hone in on the craft, and at some pretty quick turn, I took on more work than I could handle. As you imagine, that's typically how that works. Decided to bring some other folks on. And that never stopped. It just kept going. I remember at one point, my wife said, "How big do you think you guys will ever be?" And I said, "Wow, if we ever get to 10 people, that would be enough. It's enough. That would be crazy, because I can't imagine it getting any bigger than that." Turned around, it was 20 people later, then it was 40 people later, and I said, "That's it. That is the max we'll ever do." Every time I said, "That is it, I can't, handle anymore," it just kept growing. So it really started out of a need, a core philosophy that I use as part of our culture. We call it work-life spirit. I think it was really important, the work and life balance. We had I had 2 kids at the time that were fairly young. I lived probably 7 minutes from the office, but I do remember never making it home for dinner, never really seeing them off for school. I mean, it was quite the grind. And we lived in Silicon Valley. I was in a lot of startups and a lot of companies that are well known, like, really good companies with lots of equity. But it was just unbalanced in the way we wanted to live. And I felt that it was really important for us to do something that represent us as people and how we wanted to raise our children. And so that's sort of the genesis of the company. And interestingly enough, we decided that I didn't want to have a building. I didn't want a name on the building. Like, those were not symbols that I needed to replicate. And I also felt that there was a good chance I can find like-minded people that wanted this sort of work/lifestyle. And sure enough, there was plenty of us out there. And this was before work from home was a thing. I mean, people used to think it was kind of crazy at 20 people. And we saw each other once a year. How does communication work? How does any of this stuff work? Before COVID forced that to happen, right? So it was a lot of getting, folks sort of in the mental space that this can happen. And there are really good professionals out there, responsible people that, wow, you don't have to see them and you don't have to micromanage them. It's incredible. So, and that was sort of our story and how we, built the company and grew it.
How often did you have to tell your wife she was right?
I still do that today.
Yeah.
A little sidebar on that. My wife and I dated in high school, So like
Wonderful.
sophomore year, right? So I'm getting close to 50 now, so it's been a long time. And
She knows you well.
yeah, she knows me well, and I yet to have find reasons to doubt her, but I always do. It's like, no, it's not going to work out, or all my doubts. She says like, oh, you'll be fine. Sort of the same way when I started the agency, I left my corporate job. I didn't have anything in mind, and I was worried. I said, "How, babe, we don't have an income." I'm like concerned. She's like, "Oh, you'll be fine. We'll be fine." And it was scary at first, like anybody starting anything. You read all the stats that the first year is the worst, and the chances of making it, or failing is like 99%, right? So all of these things statistically are against you right away. Um, but with that said, when you do and it works out, it's great.
Yeah, and hindsight is also very helpful, right? In going on in your first year, uh, becoming an entrepreneur, right? You've seen it around you in the businesses, but you were from a corporate perspective, and then your first hire, your first few hires, those different thresholds of, oh wow, we're becoming a real company here. When did you realize you were a real company, professional? Was it at 10 people, 40 people when you sold it? When did that happen? When you felt like you finally matured from that startup, scrappy, advisor-led, entrepreneur-led company?
I think it was when I stopped caveating people in interviews. I joined. I used to be very much part of the interview process, and I remember um, always at the end of the interview, I always felt that it was a privilege for anybody that ever wanted to even have the interview to work with us. Like it's incredible. Like they voted to come to talk to us. I mean, there's so many choices, right? Um, and I would always say, we're really a startup, and there's a lot of risk. I always caveat like there's a lot of risk, and I want us to do well, but I don't. Can you imagine the CEO in the company like in an interview process? I'm just sitting there saying, "There's a lot of risk. I want you to be aware of, but here's sort of the pros and cons of the company," and very transparent about it. And at some point, one of our employees said to me, first of all, I don't need you in the interview processes anymore. I think we got it. And the second thing is we need to stop telling people there's a lot of risk. There hasn't been any risk since I've joined. Everything's been going well. So, this fear you have doesn't need to be communicated out like that. I'm like, okay, I think we're now like a real company. And I think at that point, we're probably 25 people in, full-time people, not contractors. Like that's a heavy duty payroll right there, right? So you're like, wow, okay, I guess we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it started in 2013.
Mhm.
You expanded, got to 20 or so people, and you started saying, this is a real company now. I don't have to
Mhm.
caveat these interviews. I don't have to set a low bar of expectation. Right. We're starting to view the world with more grandeur and optimism that we are building something special and it's already here versus we're that scrappy startup. What when did you start thinking selling? And when did you think of a potential exit? Because coming from San Francisco, Silicon Valley, us types typically are surrounded by the exit.
Yeah.
So when did that come into play? And then what advice did your wife give you? Because I'm pretty sure she anticipated this for you, or what?
She, so first, I didn't, I felt that was important that I took care of the people. And it would have been great if I made it like a lifestyle company where I benefited and everything's great. But that's not what I wanted, right? I felt very responsible for the people and their families. Like I said early on, it was a privilege for them to come. When they vote and they come work for you, their whole family joins, right? Because they go home, they tell the stories. They are aware of the people they're working with because that's what you share. I felt very responsible for the team. I remember saying in a meeting, like, look, we're not we don't have 40 people, we have 40 families that were employed. And I want to take care of them in a financially rewarding way, right? You have the work, you have the balance. The first time I had someone tell me that they were able to go on a field trip, promise they'd chaperone the field trip and know that nothing was going to get canceled and they didn't have to worry about work and actually get to do it for the first time. That to me was a milestone. Like those moments like made it, right? Like it's important. And there's so much of that, but at the same time, as a business, as people, you can't live off of that, right? Like financially needs to be rewarding. So I thought about that, and I also thought about opportunities to the team. As a company, had we grown, we were in a very niche space. It was in marketing automation, and there's a certain amount of growth for that, but the market isn't in the billions or something where we can become a company of like 500 or 1,000, right? So you have to get to a point where you say, okay, what are the opportunities I can give the team besides, if we did an exit financially, what are the growth opportunities in their careers? And that was very important to me that I gave them options. And so that's when the thought of, well, maybe we should sell, but sort of get acquired by a company that had all the resources. And at this point, we had international teams that were still, sort of contracting that I wanted to bring on board, and we didn't have the back office to be able to do that kind of stuff at that time. So all of those things, like we're trying to bring our teams in Asia, in EMEA together, like as employees, full benefits, everything. And so that's when all of these thoughts started to really escalate. My wife knew where it was going to go early on. She had at this point, I recruited her as the HR, bookkeeping, everything person. And then, she stepped out of that business once we got to a certain size, right? She just like, I don't want anything to do with this. But she just sort of supported the growth of it. And I think that was important. I don't think it was a matter of, can I keep the balance going more so than what would happen, in terms of an exit or non-exit. She was just happy that for the most part, I was present with our children. We never missed any vacations or anything like that because of work. And that itself was rewarding enough.
And selling for the right reason. Whenever we talk about selling a company, it's not always selling. It's the next opportunity for the people who you've given a job to, the people who are going to continue to create value in the marketplace and for the business. And that's when I share this view, that's the objective of an owner, to create something that can sustain and provide in the form of value. And a transaction is a way to grow beyond the total addressable market you've identified for your startup, for your business.
Yep.
And thinking about that early enough to where it's intentional gives huge opportunities when you ultimately are talking to buyers. So get us to the point where someone comes knocking on your door. What did that look like? How did you get their attention?
Well, I think we showed up in a couple of, I guess, publications. We were on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies 2 years in a row. I think that caught some attention. We're also in the B2B tech space, and that itself is a growing market. And a lot of the larger agencies or traditional advertising agencies, unfortunately, the market for that is just going down every year. And this was something that I think those larger agencies wanted to pursue. Like a B2B is profitable, right? It's growing. The amounts are going to continue to compound in terms of the size of the market. And they were looking for opportunities like that. And somehow we got a call or I met someone who was talking about an agency called Merkle. I didn't realize I had lunch with this person. Just met him on a whim. Had lunch and didn't realize he was like in the market or sort of scoping out things. Kind of attending events, and we just spoke, and then the conversation led to that. There were a few others that kind of came, and we evaluated all the criteria, and so it was a very interesting time, and I had prepared well for it. I knew that at some point we wanted to do this, early on, and when I thought that, I had brought in somebody who was very sophisticated in a CFO who could, organize our business in a way that speaks financial literacy really well, right? I mean, most of us don't get into business thinking we're going to ever do finance, accounting, and everything, but your entire story is written in those numbers, right? And you need somebody who's good in doing that. And I brought him on to help us reorganize everything to make sure that it's truly reflective of our growth and our people and our operational metrics. So that took, I think, about 3 years to sort of continue that path and sort of get financially disciplined to do it. I think by the time it happened quickly just because we were already in a state where we could, logically look through everything, and as well as the acquiring company didn't have any mystery around what we were doing, what our numbers were.
Yeah. The thing that's time consuming often in deals is cleaning up the mess of the target and saying, well, let us understand this because the numbers aren't speaking clearly enough to us as a buyer. And you got ahead of that. So what year did you bring on that CFO? What year was that?
I think it was like 2015, 2016, somewhere around there.
Did you feel like you were ready for that CFO, or is it slightly, okay, this is a big step to bring on this type of caliber person, and we're going to grow into those shoes?
Oh, it was definitely the biggest hire, and it was, and this person is now a good friend, but he had previously sold, took some companies public, sold some companies, so way more sophisticated than I was. And trying to hire someone or bring somebody on like that who commands a pretty high salary for what you're for the stage you're at, but I knew I needed someone like that. And so there was definitely some negotiation that had to happen, but it worked out. It worked out well. And I think it was very much worth it because it did have to do a lot of cleanup, even though, early on, I think most agency owners or entrepreneurs that start have a lot of personal/business things mixed together, right? And I had always been disciplined about keeping them separate, making sure that everything's accounted for and accountable. It's just the way I operate. And when he came on, he said, wow, okay, these finances, you look like a Boy Scout and haven't done anything. And I'm like, I tried to be very disciplined about, not mixing the two. But even then, there was cleanup and things that you restructured, and I was able to finally see numbers and things that I just never even knew existed. And I'm like, oh, this is great to actually get a true, margin, like margin numbers and such, right? Like, and I learned a lot from him. And I think it was at the right time. It was definitely a big hire for us, but it worked out. I guess hindsight, like you said, it worked out. And it became probably, it's a much better relationship now. Like now we have, war stories to talk about and things. So we're still good friends.
Yeah. And you brought on this person early enough to build a track record when they look back, right? It wasn't just the year you were trying to go to market or right when someone knocked on your door, you were prepared enough, which is a very important lesson for anyone who's listening to this. That you should be ready to sell. Now, you did something that is very important. You called it a performance business, not a lifestyle business. You didn't commingle. You didn't do the typical lifestyle, I'm going to weave my personal opportunity and expenses through the business. You're following the proper playbook for the best type of seller, right? To be the one that buyers go, oh man, he's so prepared. This is nice and easy and helpful. So you had this casual dinner. You were prepared for lunch, whatever it was. And they're like, so Ryan, have you ever thought about what the future is going to be? How much bigger the team is going to be? I've thought about maybe partnering with someone to help you get there, however they worded it.
Yeah.
But they hinted, flirted, and then said, do you want to move forward and take a look at what this could be? Unpack that after the introduction. What were the steps they took to get to know the business, get to know the potential impact, and then how long did that process take?
So the diligence process took, I would say, a good 4-5 months. So it didn't take long from the initial interest to getting down to, can I start having our people, our audit firm look at your financials and, signing the paperwork to start of, the letter of intent and everything from that. It didn't take long. It was really only because we already had our things together. I think that was really important. Like, we were well prepared. And I think a lot of folks that I talked to who want to do this, it's like, oh, I want to do it next year. And it's like, well, what did you do to prepare for this? I don't think people realize how much firms really look at everything, from the people to how the shocking thing that I found early on, you would think, as an owner, you would keep a majority of the shares. I think that's a common thing. I didn't. I gave almost more than half of it to everyone else. Like, it's just the way I believed in it. And it actually ended up being a good thing. It's, and they said, wow, it's actually really helpful to see, because that means that the team, will stay on, right? Like, they do care. And I think that there were things that I didn't realize, just doing it because you believed in it actually was a good thing, for them, for their perspective. And so that discipline, I think, was so important to make the rest of the process easy, because the rest of it was really negotiations and lawyers speaking with each other in a language you don't understand. You have to get an interpreter. And I think that was really that, and then settling in on a evaluation, right? So I think we were prepared to know what our worth was. We also knew what our position in the market was. We knew our competitors. We knew the space. Like, you really have to know these things. It's not just, oh, because I'm a good business. It's like, well, how are you ranked, and why are you good? What makes you unique? Right? It's not just because you have an agency and running revenue. Like, anybody could really do that. It's just what makes you unique. What was the value that you are, sets you apart? Those things are really important, I think, for anybody that is thinking about it. Like, and I spoke recently to an agency owner who asked about the same thing. Like, I say, if you're really thinking about this, find what you do well, highlight that, because that's really what they're going to buy. Nothing else. Like, if you do tech, don't start building website because it's money. It's like, it's not part of your business, right? So you have to really think about what's core and what's valuable, and stop chasing everything just because there's a dollar associated to it. That's not going to help you from that perspective.
As a buyer, we want to know, how is the team incentivized to stick around for, your value shows up on Friday, they leave, they're gone during the weekend, or logging off in your case for a fully remote and distributed team, and you're hoping that they show up for the stand-up on Monday.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of how this works in service businesses.
Yeah.
And we want to know, how locked in. How have you incentivized them? Is the transaction going to incentivize them? What are the rewards? Who are the key people who need to stay for what this deal creates as an expectation? And to hear that you've already rewarded acknowledge the team through the equities within the business is a fantastic check mark of just being prepared, just understanding that the people are where the value is,
Yep.
not just the owner. And so often the networks who acquire give over indexed value to an owner.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to get the key people to stay. So kudos to you for doing that. That's the right approach. And I'm a firm believer, and that's the right way to treat people. So I do want to take one step and double tap on the LOI because I know what it's like to get this LOI. And I know its impact on the home. So the first LOI, because it sounded like you were open to multiple opportunities. When you felt you had the real LOI, right? Not just the one that you're going to use to see what your value is and see how the market's responding. What was that conversation like with your wife and the family before you signed it and you got this thing? And you're like, oh, this is real now.
There was very deep sighs. There was a lot of it's one of these really interesting things where I guess the best way I can explain it is like, what if tomorrow you found that you had the winning lotto numbers? Like, what is your reaction? Like, how do you feel? Right? It's kind of like that. It's that same feeling, and so it's like it's a level of preparation, but for us, that wasn't the intent of the business in the first place. Our lifestyle wouldn't have gotten any more grand in what we do as people. My wife and I are fairly simple people. We enjoy our time together more than anything. But that represented a sort of a milestone that we've worked so hard for. And I think it was like a recognition of that. So there was definitely a moment of like it was a very emotional moment. It was, wow. And then the question she asked was, are you ready for this? I said, well, we're ready for what? She's like, know that everything you have ever done to this point will not be the same. It'll change. And she was more speaking about how the company would change. And I said, I don't think so. I mean, I'm still going to run it and it's still the same people. And she's like, don't fool yourself. They bought you for a reason. They have intents to do things that you don't know about. So just eyes wide open. Don't think it's the same. It won't be. Nobody's going to pay you to do the same thing. I'm like, man, yeah, I don't know why it's so obvious, but it's not to me sometimes. And
it doesn't have to be, Ryan. You got a good one. She's always looking out for what's around that corner.
Yes, she does. She has definitely done a lot of that. And that was the conversation, and I think there's some things, why do we all work so hard? It's obviously to get to a point where you're free to explore, do things, and feel like you can take care of your family, right? Like those are all things that you like when you checkbox those things, it's like, oh, okay. And just the mental process of it. It's not like anything's happened, right? Like we haven't gone through the entire process where it could just fall apart at the end, right? Like, and that stuff, like it was a roller coaster. That entire process was an emotional roller coaster. But the first thoughts were, wow, these checkboxes are finally there. And what do we do? And we just sort of stayed focused on getting through it. I think after you get all excited, then you go, okay, let's just focus on getting through this.
Yeah. So you got this LOI. It's an emotional moment. It's a milestone. You sign it. You agree. Who in the company at that stage was aware of the opportunity? And how did you feel as you were stepping into this due diligence process? Confident, concerned? Well, give us some insight.
So all the executives knew. They were, again, our CFO knew, all our executives. I always shared information like that with them. And I think we all took sort of a vote on continue this down this path, see where it leads, or keep doing what we're doing, can keep growing. And I think with their support, that was very important. It's everybody had to be a yes. It was really important because I always think, we had like a few execs, right? Like 5 of us together. If somebody said no and had a hard no, there must be a really good reason. But everybody said yes, let's do this. And I felt very confident. I think having the right, team in place to support every aspect of it, that that allowed you to focus. Because during this process, I think people don't realize how defocusing it can be for your business. You go through 2 quarters of this and you forget that you're still trying to make money as a company. You're still trying to do everything you normally do. And then you have this entire process you're working out. The time it takes to go through that, the number of times you fly out to pitch, to like present, to talk about the same things, and get to know the other company too, right? Like there's a lot of time invested in a very short period of time. It's exhausting. And without, the rest of the team supporting, saying, hey, I got this. You go do that while I get this part that you normally do. Like that teamwork was really important. I don't think I would have gotten through. I know it sounded very short in terms of like the time, but it's incredibly taxing on every aspect.
It's another job. It's another full commitment.
Yeah.
And Merkle is a subsidiary of Dentsu.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're interacting with a very active acquirer.
Yes.
So it's your first, step into this transaction with your business. You're stepping into the lion's den. This is their world of acquiring things they don't have to expand the empire.
Yes.
So explain a little bit what that was like, and how did you, beyond your executive team, equip yourself with advisors, people who could help you traverse and survive your steps into this lion den?
Well, I think the way you described it is probably the best way. Like it was a lion's den. I mean, they are the largest, like one of the largest acquirers, right? The Dentsu's big company. They acquired Merkle. And so there were levels of rigor that went all the way up through Dentsu. And a lot of the decisions were made in the UK as well, which had an entirely new set of regulations and ways that they were looking at things, right? Things in the US get done a little bit quicker when it comes to this stuff. In the UK, it takes a little bit. But then when it has to go to Japan as well, it took a little bit longer. Like, so you can imagine like the levels. So when I say like in the months we did it, for it being short, it's probably because we were small, right? First of all, I think.
And prepared.
Yeah, prepared. But the transaction, I think sometimes I always laugh. I think of it like, maybe this is just like a accounting error on their part for what they're, I always think about it that way, right? Like it's just chump change, for a company that size. But still, we actually had, so I mentioned our CFO. He had, again, done this. He had a firm that he knew really well that was able to put together the legal framework for it. And then we have an accounting firm that we use that knew. I mean, this guy, like, again, a serial, seller of companies, right? He's a deal maker. So I found, I think, the best guy for it. And, we were able to like tap into the existing resources and really prepare and went through all the things we need with the right people. I think also getting out of it without paying, exorbitant fees. If I just did this on my own, it probably would have cost me double or triple just because I had no idea what I was doing. Right. And I think, having that level of experience was very helpful.
It's a shortcut, right? You don't have to know the how, you need to know the who.
Yes.
And
Oh
if
yeah.
you have the right people supporting you in this process, it's a
Yeah.
lot more efficient and safer. Now, you talked about flying and pitching, and
Mhm.
unpack that for someone who's maybe being approached by one of the larger networks. What did they ask you to do to prove you were who you said you were, that you could contribute? And then how did you flip the table and say, now prove to me this is a good home for my people?
Yeah. Yeah. So we had some initial calls. They had a lot of the sort of the package, send every financial statement possible, right? Everybody always sets up a portal, you dump everything in there, and then they have their auditors go through. An outside agency, outside auditing firm usually will go through. So we had meetings, but it got down to, I think, a 2-day meeting where like the first day was all financial. Like I want to hit every single thing that you sent over every quarter, every year, every month. Like why this? It was like the entire day was mostly financially related. Um, and then the second day was all about the business itself. And so that's sort of where that's where I shine, because I knew my business. And so we had a whole day of just going through, like, again, what your value prop, where you stand, your competitor. They want to know what you're doing, and what the future plan is. Like, what's their return if they do this, right? How do they get payback for all of this? How does it make sense for them? And I think that was really important. How does it work cohesively? Um, and so we went through that entire process. And I think at the end, when we walked out of the meeting, my CFO looked at me and said, "I think you just sold the company." I'm like, "Really?" It's like, okay. So you did really well on that. Okay, well, appreciate it. And sure enough, they were at that point, they were interested. So now it became very real. Besides the LOI, there's like a whole set of other documents you sign, the purchase agreement. And that's when you get really into the nitty gritty. And at that point, once we all kind of agreed that this makes sense, then it's my turn. Then it's, because again, we're now both invested, we're pot committed at this point, right? So let's see where it goes. And this is when I started asking more about the company, the culture, how they operate. Spoke to some other CEOs that were acquired by them, and sort of different stages. Some of them have been there for 2 years, some of them just, like, I just wanted to hear from a gamut. And they were great in organizing the meetings, getting that set up, and we felt like we had the right partner. Similar culture, similar types of people. They might call it something different in terms of their work-life spirit philosophy, but it was close enough where I felt very comfortable. I also stressed the importance of our team getting opportunities to expand their career paths there. So that a lot of those things sort of really gelled well. And out of the other companies we spoke to, they had the best vision, I think, for where they wanted to go. And that's really what, besides the culture fit, that's really what sold it for us.
Culture fit and vision,
Mm-hmm.
right? What you're going to build together
Mm-hmm.
is more important
Mm-hmm.
than anything else in the deal, because that's how you get your return. That's how the promises that are being made are fulfilled. And it's important that you highlighted that. You mentioned something that people don't always, they're not aware of. The buyer is trying to quantify a return on this investment, and they need your help to do it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just something they tell you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Beyond the pageantry of here's the proposition, here's our org structure, how did you work with them to calculate the return on investment for them?
So they had a broader vision, that they were sort of formulating. Again, like these agencies have a very sort of B2C consumer oriented approach to things. They're now switching to B2B, which is an entirely different thing for them. I'm in this industry and I know it well. I think we started to really think about leverage. Like where do we fit into this B2B ecosystem of agencies that they were acquiring? So they're in the process of at that time acquiring agencies to kind of put together to form the world's largest B2B agency. Like they want to be known for the world's largest B2B agency, and no other agency has done that, right? Like none of the larger ones have done that. And I love that vision. It was very clear, very easy to say, and very easy to understand. So what we provided the sort of core infrastructure of all B2B because of marketing automation, right? So we sort of sit at the fabric of all B2B orchestration. And that was very important for us to sort of put that in instead of a piece of technology. It's the thing that sort of ties all of the branding, messaging, display, everything you think about together. We're the ones who can show you the actual ROI of how these things work out because we're the fabric and the entire value chain. It's sort of gotten sort of shortcutting it, but it kind of came down to that, and that made us very important, right? Like you can try to make a cake, but without eggs, it's really hard. Like without butter, like this is
not a very good cake, is what we're saying.
No, and we were the ingredient, right? We're the yeast that makes the things grow. Like we are the ingredient. However, many ways that you can come up with analogies. That's really the core of what we did and what we did really well. And that I think that helped, and that helped them sort of see. Because again, it's not like they have a vision, they have an idea, and there's a lot of other people just like you who they want your ideas, right? It's not like they knew and this is it, and this is what they're going to direct you to do. That's not the case. The landscape changes so often, they need folks who really think about what that future looks like and try to, experiment to get ahead of it because it's changing so often. So they really like that. I think we fit in their sort of structure really well.
Was it fun to think outside of the constraints of the small business you had been operating?
Oh yeah, that was exciting. I think at first it was more. It was exciting to learn about all the different aspects of sort of B2B marketing. Right? Like the entire value chain. Like I didn't realize how much, money goes through media buys and, what the current metrics are. Like, how do they really track these things how do you, realize revenue on that? Like there's a whole MarTech customer experience. There's identity management. Like there's so much, right? And it's like, wow, we never had to really deal with all this stuff, but now, where do we fit in this diagram of all these topics, right? So it was great. It was that learning and really then say, okay, how do we incorporate and integrate into this whole thing? Moving together as one agency, right? It was great. That was a really fun part of the journey for me because I'm not just like thinking through the day-to-day, growing this one very particular niche thing. So I enjoyed that part of it.
You got to definitive documents after the power session of cultural alignment and vision and strategy and financial, physical.
Yeah.
What you got the definitive documents that has basically the outline of all the things that you're going to be tied to, what you're representing, what to do if things don't happen. It can be, and typically is a lengthy document. How long from definitive documents being first circulated to signing? How long did that take for you?
Oh, I think that was probably the longest part of the process. It's at least 3-4 months, and only because there were so many aspects negotiated in that. So many aspects, I mean, the details that stand out um, was were foresights that like I didn't have, but the CFO had. How we account for software. Like is it above, below? Like it was just there was just a lot, right? Like because it was all on EBITDA, right? So it's like, is this an ad back or not? We're fighting over ad backs like left and right, right? But I didn't realize how much impact the ad backs had to the financial statements, right? At the end, when you do the calculations, it's like, and so there was a lot of those very detailed discussions that at first glance, you're like, just accept this. And he's like, no, we can't accept this. You're going to kill a deal on this little thing. And it's like, this little thing is important. I'm like, okay. And I listened to counsel and we got through it. But it took the longest because there was, again, lots of lawyer talk, lots of meetings, lots of, and maybe if I was had a legal hat on, I probably would have been able to see it faster. But some of the stuff, it really is Latin.
Yeah, it's veiled and mysterious and unclear.
Yes.
And you're like, give me the plain English. What does this actually mean?
Yeah.
What am I signing up for? Is there anything that stood out that you asked for that they were surprised or that they didn't typically expect for your people or for yourself? Something that you really had to fight for?
Something that we fought for that we ended up, I think this was the only part out of the entire process that we disagreed with. We let it go because it was at that point a deal or no deal kind of thing. And in hindsight, actually, there's no hindsight. Like it worked out the way it worked out. It's just some of the stipulations, because I think in the UK or there's some laws about retention of employees, whether or not stock options, stock grants can be, can be seen as leveraged retention. And we wanted a clawback phase of shares, meaning if the employees leave within an earnout period, the company has the right to buy it back. They didn't agree with that through a lot of, I guess, new updated laws about using that as a retaining mechanism and such, right? And so I had always been very good about, hey, when we get acquired, everyone gets their shares. There was somebody who was hired 2 weeks before the acquisition, got all their shares, and I'm okay with that. But there was a clause in there, and we didn't win that one. So anybody who kind of left was able to like maintain, keep it, and we never got it back. Some folks went to competitive agencies, and so it was kind of odd. It was like, we have an earnout, and you're working against us in some weird way, and which is sort of against yourself in some way. So it's a mental like thing, right? And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, but and that was probably the only part. And again, I don't know how prevalent this is as a problem, but that's the only thing that really stood out. And I can say it worked out the way it worked out. Like either way, I wouldn't know what the other way was, right? We went this way, so who knows?
Do you remember signing?
I do.
Was it because you're a remote company? Was it remote, or did you actually show up in the office?
No, it was.
What'd you do?
We digitally signed it.
It's also the year you signed it. Probably required digital signing, did it not?
Yeah, it was. Well, it was.
Like when was it?
Right before COVID. So we signed.
That.
We signed January 27th of 2020. And
snuck in there.
Had it just gone another week or two, it would have never been signed. Right. So we signed and the deal closed on the 27th. And a few weeks later, COVID. Right. I mean, can you imagine the world changing on you right after you sent out projections, you agreed to everything. And this whole world changed in a really quickly. So yeah, like I said, it's like it worked out the way it worked out, but it was definitely there were definitely some challenges there during the last period of it.
If you could go back in time and say, "Hey, Ryan, COVID is going to happen
Mhm.
right after we sign this thing,"
Yeah.
would there be things you change in the future expectations of the business or allow for margin? So, is there anything you would alter to make it safer for the business to perform or for the people, knowing
Yeah.
that your deal's done, so you don't regret it, and there's nothing you would change? But if you could go back and tell yourself, what would those be?
Well, I think I would have had some clauses on our targets, right? In terms of, conditions like that changing. I don't even know there's such a thing. It's almost like force majeure, right? Like it's an act of God. I can't do anything about this, and so therefore this clause is invoked. I mean, if there was such a thing, um, you know, I think it was the intent was let's partner. I think sometimes, what you have on paper, what everybody looked at was all they remember, right? It's like, well, no, you agreed to these. It's like, huh, that wasn't the intent of it, but okay. Hey, look, it's fair. I'm not going to say anything bad. It's fair. Like we signed something, we agreed to it, we should uphold it. It was too quickly to change it anyways, right? But if there was a way, I would have been like, hey, let's reevaluate what these are and reset conditions every so often. That probably would have helped for that time because we never anticipated that. No one did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, global events can be very disruptive to deals and the
Yes.
performance of companies, and you can't predict these things.
No.
There are now provisions which are very interesting around these types of
Oh,
environmental that you can build into expectations and transactions. So we do recommend people seek counsel that's familiar with it, but it's available to you now in many
oh,
ways.
it probably
Um,
came about because of all this.
100% did, right? The deals that happened right before
Yeah.
and set an expectation. They're like,
Yeah.
how can we predict the future? Right?
Yeah.
It's the how what do we need to build in the deal so we're not in default or not hitting our targets because of things that we can't really control.
Yeah.
And being sensitive to that now, which also makes it harder for some of the deal constructs to be rewarding at close because
Correct.
so much is now the future is unknown
Yeah.
and people leaning into that. You talked
Yeah.
about people leaving, even though it was during a period of time of contributing to the earnout and the commitment to the organization's performance.
Yeah.
That ties to integration. I always like to kind of
Yeah.
sequence our conversations to be where we're getting toward the end. It was integrations, and I'm going to be spoiler alert. You're not with the company anymore. So
Mhm.
you didn't have a long period of 5 years, 7 years commitment to this company. Share with us, what did integration look like for you and your team? And
Mhm.
what was your commitment period
Yeah.
to post close?
Yeah. So my commitment was 3 years. And the integration for the team was sort of a gradual process because, again, we have some very aggressive goals. And I sort of delayed everything possible to the last year. Just because integration will suck up bandwidth, time, and you want to miss your numbers really quickly, go through an integration right away, right? And so we needed to sort of get familiar with the org. So that was the really, the way I thought about it was, hey, we're getting into a new org. Leave us alone for the first year. Let us sort of familiarize ourselves with, just nomenclature, who you are, all that. Then next year, let's start thinking about the things we can integrate and start doing the things that are easy. And then the third year, as we get towards the end, those are like the full integration, right? Like that's the idea. Did they want to accelerate all that? Of course, they wanted really to accelerate it. But I think we had some really good language in our agreement that was black and white about, hey, no disruption to the business, or it creates other triggers, right? Um, However you want to code that, could cause problems for us. And I think that was really good in the way we had that in there. It protected us from sort of any sort of force integration. Culturally, the integration, I think it was like-minded people on the other side, which I think for the most part was good. And in this instance, there's very different levels of it. Like I think with the Merkle folks, it was, they're a US company, it was easy. Integration with Dentsu was a little bit more difficult. I think it was a cultural barrier. Some of the ways in which things worked just was different, and for us, like we had to get things done fast. They think things long term and long through. And I'm like, we have to hit numbers, right? So it's like it's a very different mindset, right? When you're kind of going against that and you're trying to push, and then you seem pushy. And so there's a lot of those things that are just like things that I never thought about, like we're so used to operating here, like get stuff done efficiently, versus let's consensus build first and then have a plan. Right. So I learned some things. Like I definitely learned some things. I'm not there. I was done. I think for me, being in a company of like 60,000 people or something, was not what I was meant to do. I mean, it was rewarding. I love this startup phase. I love starting companies. I love building companies. I love getting it to that point, but I definitely can't see myself like on a long term, like coming into companies that size and making big changes in any way. It was just never my, the way I'd like to work. So that's
Those are hard environments for entrepreneurs, right? There are founders and entrepreneurs to become one of 60,000.
They tell you that, but you don't believe it, right? Like I'm always like, oh no, I get along with people. I'm totally fine. It's like, it's not that. There's a reason why the systems exist is to prevent, the way you think about things, because it could put them in some legal trouble, right? So at some point you realize, you're like, okay, I know why they have these things here, right? To protect from things that you don't know, like I don't know, right? I'm like, yeah, I get it. But it's also a very different motion, right? I like getting things done in a way that fits an entrepreneur. That's the way I think it.
You wouldn't be an entrepreneur then if you didn't think that way, right?
Yeah.
So you've given a lot of great insights, Ryan. You dropped it in a wonderful sequence of events. If you were to bookend your tips, your suggestions, when someone just grabs you at an event and says, Ryan, you sold to Merkle, you sold Dentsu, what advice, what nuggets, top 3 things would you tell me from that experience that I should know? What would it be?
I'd say first is get your financial house in order. So, that's important. The second thing is know why you're valuable. Not just what you do, but know why you're valuable. That's the second thing. And then get versed in articulating that to whoever's acquiring. If that is the plan, get very articulate, right? And so there's a lot of branches off of that. Financial discipline doesn't mean like get your accounting and your books in order. It means like, are your people valued? Are they, how is the shares distributed? How do they rewarded financially? Do they have employment contracts with you afterward? Like think through all of those things, right? Like that's the house in order part. Know why you're valuable is not just your market positioning, but how do you scale your business? Like you need to answer for those, right? Because they're buying you for X multiple, not what you are today. And they're paying for that. So how do you scale? Like what are the levers that you have in your control, that you control, not externally, right? Know what those are. And then once you figure that out, learn how to articulate that. If you do those 3 things, everything goes smoothly. Now, that's sort of the general like summary of the way I would think about it.
And you're freed again from a corporate environment to be an entrepreneur, which leads to what you're doing now. Yes. So after exiting, what's got your attention? Where'd you go and start?
Well, I started a new company called Helix CXM, which is Helix Customer Experience Management. This was not something I thought I would start right away. My wife actually asked for 2 years.
Wait. Let's calculate this quickly, Ryan. When did you get out, and when is it?
I know. She said, "Hey, can we get 2 years of just?" But we did the coffee every morning. We had so much free time, and it was the summer, and so we took a trip. The kids, they were all super happy. Dad's always home, and so we took a trip to Thailand and went and visited, had a great time. And I had turned off everything, meaning my LinkedIn profiles was like vacation or a career break or something. And I didn't check news. I didn't read anything. I just decided to just pursue the things I want to do, which is fish and, learn some new hobbies and things. My brain went into a state of sort of, I don't know what you call it. There's no stimulus, right? No social, no news, nothing. And so we were in Thailand in the middle of, in traffic, went to Bangkok. We were on an island and we traveled all over, but then we ended up in Bangkok and we were stuck in traffic. And we ran, it was so bad that we decided, let's take the Sky Tram, whatever the tram is. We went up there. I'm like, we don't know how to pay for this stuff or take nothing. And so all of a sudden I'm inundated with data. I'm inundated with the map of the trains and the little tokens, the tickets, and everything worked so precisely. And as I'm traveling on this metro, I looked at all the buildings and the stops and I said, honey, do you know what this looks like? She goes, what are you talking about? I said, I feel like I'm a data packet traveling through a network. She goes, I said, those buildings. And mind you, I have been deprived of every sensation, right? This is the first time it's inundated me. And she had no idea what I was talking about. When I got back, I said, guess what? I have an idea for the next company. She said, what are you talking about? The thing that we never solved in anything we did, we did the sort of marketing orchestration stuff. The thing we never solved was cleaning, synchronizing, unifying people's data. Everything we built couldn't be used because somebody would always say, oh no, that doesn't look right. And I have to clean this first. And this was a mess, always a blocker to everything we did. We built the most beautiful architecture, but it can't run because the data was bad. And I said, I want to solve this. This is the one thing that I regret not doing or not getting to do. And so that's how this company started. And we're really 6 weeks in. I'm trying to find the right sort of statement for what it is. It's not like, oh, we're going to go clean your data. So far, it's data operations for B2B, for revenue operations or something. And it's but I'm still sort of now in the creative phase of building out a reference architecture, what that looks like, and I'm having a great time. This is my corner of the world again. It feels great.
Welcome back to reality. Right. It's like you are unplugged from the matrix and we just put you back in. Now you can cause a bunch of trouble.
This could be even more dangerous this time. I'm messing with people's data.
yeah, definitely. And it highlights a really important thing, right? Which is it's nice to take the break. It's nice to get out.
Yeah.
You need something though. Like the entrepreneurs, the people who build things from nothing can't just sit on a beach somewhere, right?
No.
And the time pass. The mind is too active.
Yeah.
And so to apply your enthusiasm towards a problem you wished you solve is such a powerful way to spend your time. It also creates significant impact. And you get to leverage all the things you learned from building something and taking it all the way to exit. So you kind of already know what's around the corner. And now you can maybe believe your wife when she tells you you're about to grow way beyond what your expectation could be.
Oh, yeah. I think it's, I tell her I talk to other folks who ask what it feels like to start a business. Of course, I didn't think about it at the time when I was starting. It's just you have to have something that you're so passionate about that it gets you through the really dark times. The emotional roller coaster of entrepreneurship is not for the weak. I mean, it is absolutely, incredible. Like 24/7, your mind's just, the roller coaster. And you have to have something that you're so passionate about that none of those things matter. Like none of the statistics matter. Like you're gonna fail, all of these negative things. Like you have to just I think somebody said, I listened to somebody who said, if we knew what it was like, nobody would ever do it. Like if you just like if they told you, like you wouldn't do it, right? Like so it takes a very different kind of brain to really go, yeah, like that is such a strong purpose that it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it. And I feel this way about this company as well. Like I just want to solve this. I mean, it's something I want to solve because I know there's not an organization where I go, hey, how's your data? And they're like, oh, it's perfect. It's pristine. It's wonderful. It's exactly what we want. Nobody says that, but nobody wants to tackle it, right? Until not that nobody wants to tackle it, just got to find a way to make it easy for them to tackle. And I think that's my solve this time, trying to solve this. So either way, I know at the end of it, I'm always going to have an incredible time learning and doing. So I enjoyed it. I enjoy the journey this time a lot more than the first time. It just feels like I'm taking the moments to really enjoy this process. Before it was just more like, get it done or our family doesn't eat, like you think about it differently.
Yeah. Survival versus thriving. And congratulations, Ryan, for surviving the journey that is starting an agency and selling it. I appreciate you coming on, sharing with the listeners sage advice. If someone wants to get a hold of you, maybe even wants to join Helix, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Just I'm on LinkedIn, Ryan Vong, or
you turned it back on, is what you're saying.
I turned it back on. Yeah, I turned it back on. I might have to create a company page now at some point, but I turned it back on. Or Ryan at helixcxm.com. Just email me. You'll find me out there. I'm easy to approach. I try to get back to everyone. I'm not. I don't have anybody managing I'm not that popular. So,
well, Ryan, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate this conversation. Lots of going down memory lane, but it feels good. I hope that your listeners get, something out of it. I really do. I wish them all the best, especially all the entrepreneurs out there. We're such a special breed. I love talking to others because we all sort of share very similar feelings and thoughts and stories. And we need to support each other more than anything. We all really need the support more than most folks, because we're emotional creatures. So thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. A big thank you to Ryan for joining us today on this episode of Agency Acquisitions and Exits. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube. Give us a follow. We post stories from industry experts about how they sold or acquired agencies. If you know of someone who should be on the show and share their journey, let us know in the comments. Send us an email. We'd love to talk to you. As always, thank you for listening. We appreciate you, and stay safe.